First of all, welcome everyone to our annual Social Security 101 webinar. My name is Gina Buchholz. I'm one of the advisors on the 401k Plan Professional team. And again, we appreciate that you join us today. This is an educational opportunity, a value add that we share with our clients and their employees. So we certainly appreciate it. And again, backed by popular demand is Zach Lindsay and Jack Wood, our partners from MFS Investments. So very glad the dynamic duo could join us again. I will introduce them in just a moment, but just want to touch on a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded. We also will have a number of resources available to you afterwards. MFS has a great Social Security guide, great reference guide. You can also have the deck and, of course, the recording. That can be shared with anyone. You can rewatch it as many times as you want. You should get the recorded link if you're registered, but if you don't, you can always find the recording to our webinars on our website at 401kplanprofessionals.com or our YouTube channel. So those are always out there. We have lots of webinars this year. We also have Medicare coming up and health savings accounts. Those will be two popular ones as well. I'll let you know when those will happen too. Questions. I know there's always a lot of questions. Make sure if you could please enter any questions into the Q&A. We'll also keep our eye on the chat. Q&A is just a little easier for us to follow and the rest of the audience as well. Zach will pause a couple times throughout the presentation. The presentation's probably about 35 minutes or so, but again, we're going to answer questions throughout. So he'll pause a couple times. Jack is going to be answering a lot of those questions behind the scenes. So he's going to be putting those answers in. We'll also have time for questions at the end and also resources for you later to submit other questions. So we're hoping to get all the questions answered. I think Zach and Jack mentioned, I think you guys did this presentation like 90 times last year.
It was a good amount. It was a
Yeah,
good amount.
good amount. So they've seen a lot of questions. So I think that would qualify you as subject matter experts. So
Hmm.
again, just real briefly, Zach Lindsay with MFS Investments. Zach has been with MFS since 2018 in a variety of roles, but his primary role is providing financial education, including topics like Social Security and cybersecurity. So Zach, thank you again. And
Mhm.
also, again, tag team, it's kind of hard to say Zach and Jack.
Yeah.
But Jack Wood also has been with MSF Investments since 2019. He's had a variety of roles as well, and he partners a lot with Zach, again, especially when we have a big audience and we know we're going to have a lot of questions. So appreciate both of you. Doing this again, and I will, Zach, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, let's get to the fun stuff, right? Um, so yeah, as far as this is our second year doing this with you, Gina, and your team. We of course appreciate the opportunity, and love the fact that we can come in here, provide this education for your clients. So I like to usually start off as Gina introduced me professionally, is do a little bit more of a candid introduction, right? As Gina mentioned, I've done this a ton of times, and find it hilarious at times as a lot of people come up to me and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, what is some young 30-year-old dude doing lecturing Social Security? So to address that elephant in the room, if you will, it actually came through a personal family member. My aunt and uncle, 3 years back, filed for their Social Security benefit. Ultimately, they subjected themselves to some mistakes. Now, I come from a family born and raised outside of Philadelphia in South Jersey. My entire family is essentially blue collar. Electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters. I have a couple nurses in my family as well. So my uncle, being an electrician, my aunt, a nurse, filed for their benefit right away at 62, but my aunt kept working. Okay, they subjected themselves to something called the earnings limit, which don't worry, we will cover that today. But ultimately, they came to me, being the only person in the family or immediate family that works for a financial company. But 3 years ago, the only reply I had to them was a shoulder shrug. I had no idea how to help them at the time, but knowing that, hey, my own parents are going to be retiring soon. Okay. My other aunt and uncles are going to be retiring soon. I should probably take this upon myself to learn so that I can be that extended help to those family members. Okay. Now, that's the elephant in the room of how I got addressed. I also mentioned that short story because if you find yourself maybe younger than 55, 50 years old, and you're still 10, 15 years out to the decision of claiming your own benefit, you never know who you're going to help with the information you learn today. Okay. So that kind of opens it up to a larger age demographic, if you will. But I will say the way normal people get involved, and I'm obviously excluding myself from that category with their Social Security benefit, is what you see on your screen, right? Maybe they get their statement in the mail for their first time. Now, this doesn't actually happen until you're age 60 or older. I think that's way too late. If I told you, hey, you can claim your benefit at 62 and you're going to get your statement for the first time at 60, I don't think that justifies enough track record, enough room for you to plan around that decision, right? But don't worry, you don't have to wait till 60 to get your information. You can go to ssa.gov and log in straight through the website. If you go there, just know there's two separate logins you can choose from. Regardless of which one you choose, you are going to get to the information you need regarding your benefit. My recommendation, go and establish that account. Okay, if you know you have a single year paid in, even myself at my age, I have an account that exists for me. If you know you've at least paid 1 year, go in and establish that account. Might seem a little invasive at the start. You might need your social security number to establish. But again, once you establish that account, you can go in and review each earnings year record that you have paid into the trust fund. Okay. Now, after my recommendation of establishing the account, my next recommendation is read through it, right? Read through the statement, whip out that calculator, play with the math, right? We're going to teach you today how to figure out how to calculate what you're going to get at full retirement age through those numbers and earnings year record. But I think that's just a natural and organic way for you to understand your benefit picture that much more. Okay. And of course, we always joke amongst our friends and family how often government messes things up. So why not audit them? Right. And I've actually heard of cases of people catching mistakes within their benefit by just simply whipping out the calculator and doing the math. Okay. Now, what we feel is often the most skipped part of your statement, and don't worry, I'm not going to tell you to go digging for that. So cross that off your homework. We cherry picked it right in the top right hand corner, okay, for you, which is your benefits are not intended to be your only source of income when you retire. So for everyone on the call today, your post retirement income picture is always going to be unique to you. Some of you may have IRAs, right? Roths, traditionals. Maybe you have 401ks, maybe multiple 401ks from past employers. Some of you may have rental property income, right? Or maybe a side pension that you've accumulated. Regardless, all of these outside factors, these puzzle pieces, will come into play, not only for your, of course, post-retirement income, but they're also going to be important on a determining factor on when it's best to take your benefit. Okay, we commonly say that your Social Security benefit is the one leg of the three-legged stool of post-retirement. Okay, so one leg of three legs is 33%. Those other 66 odd percent, right? Those other outside accounts will help you determine when it's best to take your benefit beyond just your health, your work status, and all those other important questions that we need to ask. Okay. Now, we only, of course, have the next 30 odd minutes to talk. So we're just addressing the one leg, which is the Social Security component. So as you see on your screen, our agenda today is we're going to be talking about your own benefit. We're then going to carry on to options for married couples, right? Spousal, survivor, divorce benefits, even, right? And then everyone's favorite topic, which is taxes and the role taxes play in your retirement benefit. Now, we're going to cover a lot of material today. Is it realistic that everything I cover is going to apply to everyone on the call? I can almost guarantee you not. Now, I'm not going to sit there and be that parent and say, don't be selective or be selective in your hearing, because I feel like that might detriment your understanding of topics if you hear it at the last minute before I move on to the next. So instead, what I did is as we go through the presentation, I labeled 5 key gold slides. Okay, because again, with the amount of material we're covering today, not all of it's going to be applicable to all scenarios, but those 5 slides will. And I think that those 5 slides will essentially apply to all people, if not the majority. Okay. So I'll make those known when we get to those. And those are the slides that I think we should take home today, if anything. Okay. Now, the first thing, again, we're going to be talking about is your own benefit. As we go through each of these benefits, too, I'm going to keep the conversation uniform just so it's easy to understand. So, as we go to each benefit, we're going to talk the eligibility of the benefit, the calculation of the benefit, and then we're either going to throw a case study your way to help shine some more light on it, or we'll throw some common mistakes made on each benefit just so that you know to avoid. Okay. So the first slide when it comes to your own benefit, and really all benefits here, is our first key gold slide as well, which is know your full retirement age. Okay, as you see on your screen, it starts at 66 and then it gradually increases by 2 months until 67 for everyone born 1960 or later. Now, if you're doing the math as quickly as I sometimes do, is next year it gets a lot easier for everyone. Okay, 1960 plus 67 is 2027. So finally, next year, everyone's full retirement age will be 67. But I typically ask here, and I'll usually say in a live setting, let me show a raise of hands or feel free to shout out. I don't even know if anyone can unmute in this call. So, and I wouldn't recommend flooding the chat here. But I usually ask, when do you think the last time they changed the full retirement age from 66 to 67? I'll just let you know it was 1983 during the Reagan administration. I make that aware to everyone because one of the most common concerns we get today is, will Social Security be there when I need it? Okay, 5, 10, 15 years from now, will it be there based on what I've been planning on? Okay. Now, there's a lot of headlines out there about insolvency, right? We all know that media makes money off of our clicks, and the scarier the headline, like your Social Security benefits are going away, is probably going to endorse our clicks a little bit more. But I want to soften that pillow and say there's a lot that can be done to change from now till then through Congress to help with the insolvency issue. I think pushing the full retirement age back a year probably is the most justifiable thing that they can do, right? People are living a bit longer today than they were in the early 80s. But I would say if you're 50 and older today, you will be grandfathered into current rules. Because the last time they changed it, and if we're learning any lessons of what we've done in the past, right, which we can only hope for, the last time they changed it, look how long they grandfathered in dates of birth. There are people today turning 66 and 10 months, hitting their full retirement age. Okay, still grandfathered into those incremental months. So if you're 50 and older today, I would be rest assured that what you've been planning on your whole life will be a grandfathered in rule. Okay. Now, that's just from my confidence, right? Really, anything can happen. But ultimately, I'd trust that because not only is that something you've been planning your whole life on, right? But if you're 50 and older, you're also part of the largest voting demographic of the United States. And I don't know what congressman or congresswoman will write, co-sponsor, or sponsor a bill that's going to take your benefits away from you. Okay, so that's me, a young 30-year-old, tapping all you 50 plus on the shoulder and saying, yes, currently with Social Security, your opinion matters more than me. So hopefully that helps soften the pillow with anyone having those concerns. Now, as we discuss your own benefit, right at the top, let's just start with eligibility first. How do I know I'm eligible for Social Security? Well, first off, it's 40 quarters, which is 10 years of earned income paying into the trust fund. Okay. Then to figure out what you get at that full retirement age, they're going to average out your 35 highest years of work. So just know if you don't have total of 35 years, there will be zeros that get added to your average. Okay. Then we look below that with the two graphs. Again, most of us are going to be on the right-hand side with the green bars, but now we can see the pluses and minuses of taking it either at, after, or before full retirement age. Okay. Now, those additions and minuses, of course, those are also in addition to any cost of living adjustment, which is what, Social Security calls that inflation adjustment amount. Okay. Now, a typical question I get here is, hey, Zach, why don't I just take my benefit at 62? Right? I have the best advisors on the planet. I'm going to take that money at 62. I'm going to hand it all to them. They're going to invest it, right? Or maybe I'm a savvy investor myself. I'm going to invest that money and I'm going to get more from the market investing my Social Security benefit at 62 than what Social Security can do for me naturally if I leave it in the trust fund. Okay. Now, I would say for that question, it is always case by case. It's always going to be unique to your scenario, what you're going through, your outside accounts, your health, your work status, all the above. Okay. But if we're going to take that question and look at any studies or data that tells us, hey, is there a one shoe size fits all that tells us that that might work out in our favor? Well, the Journal of Financial Planning, they ask that question every single year. In 2023, they said, let's look back 100 years of market returns and average that out, right? And look at taking at 62 and investing it and see if we can ever get a better outcome than what Social Security does naturally. And 80% of all cases, they actually found it better to just leave it in the trust fund with that inflation adjustment you get than to take it right away and invest. Now, to show how complicated that question can be, they didn't even wait 13 months. The very following year in 2024, they asked the same question, but instead of looking back 100 years, they looked back 15 years of market returns. Okay. And looking back only 15 years of market returns, they said, actually, it's best to just take it right away and invest, and you're going to get more out of the market. Now, Gina and I can probably take the next full hour and talk about how unprecedented the last 15 years of the market has been compared to the last 100. But because of that change, slight change of the data set and the different answers or the different outcomes, that only reassures to me that this is unique. And it's always going to be case by case. And it's always going to revolve around the proper questions to ask before planning. So, are you working? Right? Are you married, widowed, divorced? What's your tax scenario? What's your withdrawal rate? What expenses do you need to meet? These are all important questions that will determine when it's best for us uniquely on when to take the benefit, not a one shoe size fits all. Okay. So let's dive in right away to the first question, why we ask, are you working? This is the slide that we can all thank my aunt and uncle's mistakes for why I'm here today, because this is ultimately what they subjected themselves to. So this is what the earnings limit or that earnings test is. Okay. And right at the top, you can see, I want to drive home this point. It affects all benefits. So whether it's your own retirement benefit, a spousal, a survivor, a divorce, even disability has something like this. They just call it something different called a recent work test, which essentially is revolved around the same thing. So the earnings limit will affect any benefit. Okay. Now, essentially, what it just says is that when you're collecting your Social Security benefit, there's a limit to how much you can earn through a gross wage. Okay. But the important factors here is, for one, it only looks at gross wages, right? So think someone has to be paying me, right? A W-2 or on a 1099, someone else is paying me for a service or a job I'm doing. Okay. So unearned income, such as pensions, IRA money, rental property income, those things are not included on this earnings test. Okay. Secondly, it only looks at the individual taking their benefit. So regardless of your married, jointly filing status with the IRS, if you're taking your Social Security benefit, it's only looking at your wages. Okay. And thirdly, and a little, most importantly, I would say, is it only affects individuals turning their benefit on before full retirement age. Once you hit full retirement age, go ahead and rip this page up like your dog did your sixth grade homework, because Social Security does not care how much money you make once you turn full retirement age. That's essentially their pat on the back and said, hey, you made it this far. Go ahead and make as much money as you want and collect your full benefit as well. Okay. But when we really drive home how the withholding works, is why this is one of the first questions we ask for anyone taking a benefit before they hit that full retirement age. Because the way the withholding works is it's not dollars on checks, it's numbers of checks. Okay. Most people think, hey, I'm going to earn, let's just say, a couple $1,000s over the limit. That averages out to maybe a couple $100 off each check. No worries. I can take that on the chin. When in reality, they might go several months in a row without a check at all. And the typical scenario of somebody claiming before they hit full retirement age typically means they need that money to hit their expenses in retirement. And if you need that money, going months in a row without getting a check at all can be very detrimental. Okay. So that's why we always try to drive home this point on before full retirement age. We need to know if you're working and how long you plan on working. And just be aware that this comes into play. Okay. Now, just in case you made a mistake, right, or you have to go back to work, we want to make sure you're aware of some of those options. Now, I know it's kind of counterintuitive to how we've all learned how to read, but I like to start on the right-hand side of this slide, because at any age, you can withdraw your application as long as you catch that mistake and withdraw it within 12 months. You pay back everything they paid to you, and Social Security just pretends like you never filed in the first place. Okay. Now, in the middle, if you're at or after full retirement age, you can actually suspend your benefits, which means you stop receiving it, but you can also continue to accrue your benefit. Okay. And there is a monthly accrual rate as well as that 8% annual accrual rate. Okay. And then just know that if you do suspend it, know that you can't take any benefit off that record anymore. So your spouse, if they're taking a spousal off you, can no longer receive that spousal benefit. And if you're paying Medicare premiums out of your Social Security check, which usually happens automatically when you're enrolled in both, just know that once you suspend Social Security, you have to pay those premiums then out of pocket. And then left on the left-hand side, if you go back to work and you're still younger than full retirement age, ultimately you just have to see benefits withheld. And you do ultimately get those benefits back, but it's recalculated once you finally turn full retirement age, and then they kind of add on a little bit over future checks. Okay. So if you are 62, you filed for that benefit, and then at 64, you just get that job offer that you just can't refuse. Your only option really is just to go back to work, stop receiving your Social Security benefits, and then see an upward adjustment once you finally hit full retirement age. Okay. Now we're going to go on to those other benefits of spousal, survivor, and divorcee. Just before we do, Jack, is there any questions that were submitted that had to do with people's own retirement benefit or that earnings test?
Thanks, Zach. I don't think we saw anything else come into the chat. There was just a question before the call regarding IRA and 401k distributions that I'm going to submit in a second here.
Gotcha. Yeah, and just reassuring that those are not included on the earnings limit because remember, it is wages. Someone has to be paying you for a service like on a W-2 or a 1099 for it to count. All right, so moving on to spousal benefits. So even if you never worked, right, you could be eligible for up to 50% of your spouse's benefit at full retirement age. But again, keeping this conversation uniform, okay, I want to make sure we're eligible first. Okay. So how am I eligible for a spousal benefit? I'm sure a lot of us can probably guess one of the first requirements. You have to have been married. Okay. Then that length of marriage rule states that you have to be married for 1 full year when you go to take the spousal. The only exception to that 1 year waiting period is that if you were previously receiving a benefit off of an ex, once you remarry, you just switch to the new earnings record and continue receiving that new spousal benefit. Okay. The next requirement, just like your own benefit, is you have to be 62 or older. That's it. Once we worked out that, or excuse me, the third requirement, there's one more. Your spouse must be collecting their benefit for you to get one off them. Okay, so that's it. You're 62 and older. Your spouse is getting a benefit. You're married at least 1 year. You can get a benefit off them. Okay. Now, once we worked out you're eligible, how do we calculate that benefit? For all scenarios, okay, for every single scenario out there, we are basing our calculation of a spousal benefit off of whatever our higher earner spouse is getting at their full retirement age. Okay. We then take that amount and then we multiply it by the percentage that corresponds with our age when we take that benefit. And you can see those percentages across your screen now corresponding with the age. Now, my one important note here is that there was prior a rule called file and suspend. So if you hear that terminology, or if you're using ChatGPT and you Google or whatever, and you hear the words file and suspend, just know that that is no longer available. And anyone that was grandfathered into that rule is now grandfathered out. Okay, what that previous rule allowed you to do was to be able to switch between the two benefits. So now, when you file for your Social Security benefit, you are technically filing for both your benefit or the spousal off your spouse. Now, you're only going to get one benefit, and it's always the highest you're entitled to. So again, when you file, you're going to get one of those benefits, but they will give you the highest of the two. Okay. Now, I know going through the spousal, the percentages, the different ages, and the percentages, right, can be a bit confusing. So don't worry. We have a little case study here, right? Our little ditty about Jack and Diane. Now, I don't think any of you are in the East Coast. I'm in Boston. It is still in the low 40s, high 30s. We're actually supposed to get snow this evening. So I reserved John Mellencamp only for the summer months. And I hope that's thankful from the audience so that you don't hear my horrible singing voice. So no, I'm not going to sing the song because, again, it's only for summer. But we're going to throw a little twist on the song. And we're going to say Diane is the star athlete, right? She's the high earner. And Jack is the Butillion. Okay, which is just a male's version of a debutante. Now, what we want to know is based on different ages that Diane claims her own benefit, what is Jack's maximum and minimum off of Diane? Okay. Now, this is my only graphic of the presentation, so bear with me here as I carry along, but I really feel like that this graphic really shows how the spousal calculation works. So Diane claims for her own benefit at full retirement age, she gets that 100% number, the 10,000. Okay. Jack files at 67, so he gets the full 50%. Jack files at 62, he gets that reduced spousal of 32.5%. Okay. Now, what if Diane waits and accrues her benefit all the way till age 70? If Jack files at either of those ages, it's the same. Because remember, we're always basing the spousal off of Diane's full retirement age. Okay. Then Diane, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but Diane decides to file early at 62. What has happened for Jack at 62 and 67? Again, the same. So hopefully this graphic really drives home the point of how we're calculating the spousal and how it works for that spouse taking the spousal. Okay. Now, in the real world, however, a lot of times the decisions between the two spouses are not as easy as just Jack getting a percent off the other, right? So the real world is closer to, well, what if Jack were to claim his own benefit first? Jack gets an amount from himself, and then Diane files years later. What happens is when the higher earner files after the lower earner, as long as the math works out to a positive, the lower earner gets a top off, which is what's called the excess spousal benefit. Okay. The way they determine if, in this case, Jack gets a top off from Diane is they're going to take the max that Jack could have gotten, the full 50% number, and then they're going to minus what Jack could have gotten at full retirement age. Okay. And then if there's any dollars left over after minusing from that, they're going to add those dollars on to whatever Jack was currently receiving. Now, the excess spousal benefit is probably one of the number one questions we get when it comes to spouses and trying to figure out, maximizing one filing at one age, one filing at the other, and how it all works out. So we drew this scenario out a little bit more, right, to give that example. So in this case, we see on the left, Jack retires at 62. And on the right, you see Jack's benefit at 62 is that 1,400. And then if he waited at full retirement age, it would have been 2,000. Diane is 62 also at the time that Jack files, but she plans to work for 5 more years and then file when she's 67, which her benefit at that time will be 10,000. So what's Jack going to receive now? And then what is he going to receive once Diane applies 5 years later? Well, we do that math. So Jack starts with the 1,400, that reduced number. Diane files 5 years later, and we do the math of the max spousal off of Diane, which is the full 50%, the 5,000. We then minus off that what Jack's full retirement age benefit would have been. So we do 5,000 minus 2,000, gives us then that top off of 3,000, which is then added on to Jack's benefit he was already receiving, going from the 1,004 to the 4,004. Okay. Now, I will say that it's more likely that this scenario comes up the larger the spread between the spouse's benefits. If you and your spouse's benefits are closer aligned, you will most likely never see this calculation come into play. It's really where the benefits are vastly different when you're dealing with, say, a $3,500 or a $4,000 monthly benefit and a $1,000 or $1,500 benefit. That's where it's more likely that this lower earner will be topped off when the higher earner applies later. Okay. So hopefully that squares away some of the people's questions around spousal benefits and how it works when the spouses are claiming at different ages. So just before we move on to survivor, Jack, any questions that you've gotten regarding the spousal benefits?
Nothing more regarding spousal benefits as I'm looking forward to this right now. Just going through and answering, but I think we should be all.
Yeah, and if we get them, like I know a lot of people are asking a lot of questions, so we'll address those as much as we can at the end as well, even if we can't get them immediately in the section that you guys are asking. So moving on to survivor, just like spousal, if you've been married, you could be eligible to survivor. But of course, we want to start with how am I eligible for a survivor benefit? Okay, again, the first requirement, a lot of us can probably guess, you have to be married. All right. Now, that length of marriage rule states that if you were married when your spouse passed, you had to have been married for 9 months. Okay. If you were divorced and your ex-spouse passed, you had to have been married for 10 consecutive years to retain that survivor benefit. Okay. The next is you're 60 and older. Okay. They understand, hey, you possibly lost half your household income. We'll give you 2 years earlier to claim that benefit. Okay. That's it for survivor eligibility. Okay. You were married at some point, either 10 consecutive years, or you're currently married for 9 months and your spouse passed away and you're at least 60 or older. That means you're eligible for a survivor. Okay. And of course, the other eligibility is that your deceased spouse or deceased ex-spouse would have had to have eligibility of Social Security for a survivor benefit off them to exist as well. Um, I sometimes get that in question. So, but then how do we figure out how the calculation works? So it's pretty similar to the spousal math, but the number we're going to be basing our calculation off of is one of two scenarios. So scenario one, your spouse, before they passed, claimed their benefit. If they claimed any benefit, the benefit we're basing, or the amount we're basing the survivor benefit off them is whatever they were receiving at the time of death. Okay. Scenario two is if they didn't claim. And if they didn't claim before full retirement age and passed away, we're immediately jumping up that number that we're basing this off of to whatever they were going to get at full retirement age. And then if they passed away at 68, 69, 70 without claiming, then we're using that date of death and those accruals that they've accrued, right? The accrual rates on their benefit as well. Okay, that we're basing the math off of. So then once we figure out the number we're basing the calculation off of, then it's very similar to spousal where we take that amount and then multiply it by the percentage that corresponds with our age when we turn that on. And as you can see, those percentages and the ages across your screen, most of us, again, are going to be in the gray bars, full retirement age being 67. Now, there's four major key differences that I want to point out when it comes to survivor benefits and how they differ from the other benefits. Okay. The first two might be obvious, right? Because they're on your screen. The first one's the age, right? I mentioned it earlier, 60 versus 62 for spousal or your retirement. Okay. So survivor, you get those 2 years earlier to claim. The second difference is the percentages. Remember, the max spousal you can get is 50. The max survivor is 100%. Okay. The third key difference, which you're not going to find on the slide, is to current rules state that if you're going to file for your own benefit or a spousal benefit, excuse me, you can actually do so through your online account or through a phone appointment. Current rules state that to file for a survivor benefit, right now you have to do so in person. And with current wait times being anywhere between 1 to 3 months to get that in-person appointment, we want to be sure that you're aware. Bring the proper documentation to that appointment. The last thing we want is for you to wait that period to get the appointment and then ultimately had to rebook another because you need additional paperwork to prove that you're eligible for the survivor. Now, the good thing is, it's hard to say there's any good things when you're talking survivor benefits, but you can retroactive this benefit up to 6 months. So if your spouse passed away from the date of death up to 6 months later, if you file for it 6 months later, you can get those 6 months backdated and a lump sum check. Okay. Now, the fourth and final key difference, which I think is probably the most important to drive home, is remember when I said you can't start with your own benefit or the spousal and then switch between the two? With survivor benefit, you can. Okay. So if you have a higher earner and a lower earner spouse, and that lower earner spouse was the one that passed away, that higher earner spouse can theoretically turn on the survivor benefit off the lower earner while they continue to grow their higher benefit and then switch to that at 70, right? When they maxed it out and then receive that indefinitely. And the same can be said about the vice versa scenario where the lower earner can take their own small benefit first up until 67 when their max survivor percent hits and then switch to that off their higher earner spouse that passed away and then receive that indefinitely. So I know going through those if-thens, it can be confusing. So don't worry, we have another couple case studies here to help bring this to light. So here we have higher and lower earners, right? If you see on the left, higher earners getting 3,100, lower earners 1042. They both file at 65. Fast forward 10 years later, higher earner unfortunately passes away. Because the lower earner is at least full retirement age or older, they can go from whatever they were receiving to 100% of what the higher earner was receiving, going from that 1042 to the 3,100. Okay. So if you're working out, right, between the two spouses, how important the higher earner's decision is, that leads us to our next gold slide. Okay. So our first key gold slide was know your full retirement age. Our second key gold slide was that earnings test, right, or the earnings limit. Our third key gold slide is where we find ourselves now, which is emphasize the higher earners benefit. Okay. Now, just as a hypothetical, right, to make a case for what I'm saying here, is on your screen, let's pretend that green and blue are a married couple. All right. And again, for the sake of the argument, let's say they both took at 62. Blue's getting 26,000 a year, green's getting 41,000 a year. If green were to pass away, as long as blue's full retirement age or older, they can go from 26,000 a year to the 41,000 a year. Yes, it's a substantial jump, but know that prior their household income was the two added. Okay, so they lost a majority chunk of that dual income for the household. Now, what if the higher earner maxed their benefit instead? Okay, now we have green taking at 70, getting 62,000 a year. Okay, and if blue were to go from 26,000 to 62,000 a year, that would be a much more substantial survivor benefit for blue between the two married couples. Okay, so for those of you out there between you and your spouse, those that have the higher earning benefit, right, the larger Social Security benefit, we would emphasize your decision, okay, between you and your spouse, and we would recommend or advise you changing the conversation of your benefit from a me benefit to a we benefit, okay? Because if you were to pass away, your benefit becomes a survivor benefit for your spouse. Okay, I realize that by waiting till 70 to take yours, right, it might not mean that you get all your benefits that you've paid in during your lifetime, but through the lens of Social Security, it does mean you're doing everything you can to protect your spouse financially. And that could be the reason to wait to file at 70. Regardless of how you think about it, our advice, again, changing it from a me to a we conversation, when you're talking to your advisor about game planning around the decision to take your benefit, my recommendation is at minimum, have both statements available. I don't know what advisor on the planet, whether they're the best in the world, can plan on a household income into retirement without both statements there. Okay. Of course, if your spouse can physically be there, that's great. You know, it's nice to have them aware of their options if you were to pass away. But at minimum, when you're planning, have both statements available. Okay. Now, quickly, I do want to review the divorcee side for any divorcees on the call, or dare I say future divorcees. You know, you talk Social Security enough, you talk enough of those morbid scenarios. But what we really want to get across to divorcees is the remarry rules. Okay, because traditionally, if you remarry, you're going to forfeit all the benefits off of your ex. Okay, but there's two exceptions to that. The first is if you remarry after turning 60. Okay. If you do so, you're going to retain the survivor benefit off of your ex. And remember, the survivor benefit is the bigger benefit. Okay. So if you were married for 10 consecutive years, you got divorced, and you found new love, right? Maybe you're 58, especially if your ex is richer than your new love, you may want to wait to drop the knee until at least age 60 so you can retain that survivor benefit off the richer ex. Okay. Now, the second exception to that remarry rule is if then the second marriage ends, and that can be through death, annulment, or divorce, right? You can become re-entitled to the benefits off the first marriage. Now, typically I review that and I get a few people in the back of a room that starts looking out into space, scratching their chin and saying, or it makes me think that they're thinking about how they can maximize all these prior marriages they've had and how they get the most from Social Security. Well, don't worry. We have a real life scenario. We have Jane Fonda, because Jane Fonda has set herself up better for Social Security than anyone I've ever heard. Okay. As you see on your screen, she was married to Tom Hayden up top. Marriage lasted at least 10 years, ended in divorce. Okay. Then she was married to Ted Turner, or Theo on your screen at the bottom, married at least 10 consecutive years, ended in divorce. So Jane's options are technically she can do her own retirement benefit, which is probably not small, the survivor benefit off Tom Hayden since he's passed away, or the spousal benefit off Ted Turner because he's still alive. Whichever one is higher between those three, Jane is going to get. Then if Ted Turner were to kick the bucket anytime soon, Jane could switch to the benefit off him if it's higher than any of the current ones she's collecting. All right, so hopefully that squares away all the thinking about prior marriages and maximizing Social Security. So now we're going to move to our last and final topic, which is taxes and the role taxes play within Social Security benefits. Just before we do that, Jack, any questions to address regarding the survivor benefit?
Just one that came up that I'm in the middle of answering, but I
Okay.
figured it would be good to remind everybody that whether it is spousal, divorce, or survivor benefits, if you are under full retirement age, wish to claim one of these benefits, and you are still working, you will be subject to that earnings test that we mentioned. So that
Yes.
applies to any benefit that you're looking to receive from Social Security if you're under full retirement age and working.
Yes, I appreciate you driving home that, Jack. It is very important. Probably the most common question we get, and a common question we always ask for anyone taking a benefit before full retirement age to know that if you are working, that earnings limit will come into play. So off to taxes. Taxes, the way it works with your Social Security benefit is they use something called combined income. We're going to show that on another slide, but quickly to show your income thresholds to see how much Social Security will be added to your income or that combined income and then thus become taxable is for anyone filing single at 25,000 or jointly filing at 32,000 or more. I know those numbers might seem small, but remember the intent here or the incentivizing intent here is that you're not going to be making any money. You're not going to be collecting income or wages when you're taking your Social Security benefit, right? Now, the good thing is, and I don't know if you can ever really say good things when you talk taxes, but the good thing is that if you see in your top right-hand corner, 85%, that is the max tax rate on your Social Security benefit. So Uncle Sam is going to give you at least that 15% cushion, but I get it. It is frustrating, right? Because you spent your whole life paying into the trust fund, and now, of course, it's being taxed on the way out of the trust fund. But the way that I would provide advice, and I'm going to reassure some disclosures here. I am not a CPA. I am not a tax professional. But the way I advise all people on taxes, being not a professional, is use the GI Joe approach, right? The GI Joe approach is knowledge is half the battle, right? And we kind of joke all the time that the more you know about taxes, the less you pay, right? So know what goes into the taxable equation, and that will allow you to naturally play that defense in tax liability. So what's the tax equation, right? To determine how much of your Social Security benefits may be added to your income. Again, this is that combined income. Another terminology they like to use is called provisional income. Okay, so those are one and the same, but essentially it's your adjusted gross income plus tax exempt income plus half your Social Security benefits. Okay. Now there are some investment vehicles, right? And accounts that are not included on this combined income equation. I think it's important to be aware of what those are, because if you have the ability to let some of those outside accounts and withdraw from some of those outside accounts while you let your Social Security benefit grow, and then at the end of the day, your Social Security benefit makes up the majority of your post-retirement income, that can actually be a tool in your toolbox to play defense on taxes. So don't worry, we have a case study to show how that works. And this is our fourth key gold slide because I really feel like that by letting Social Security grow, this shows how that can help with taxes. Okay. So here we have a married couple. They have an after-tax income goal of $100,000 a year, and they're contemplating taking at 62 or 70 for their Social Security benefit. And if you can see on the 70 side or the 70 column, if they wait till 70 in that first row, the majority of that $100,000 goal is going to be made up of their Social Security benefit, which means in the second row, they have to withdraw less from those tax deferred accounts to make up the in between, which means in the third row, less of a combined income equation. Okay. And that obviously works out as we work our way down to less of a federal tax liability. And again, my disclosure here is that this is a perfect hypothetical. What it's not meant to do is it's not meant to tell you that by letting Social Security grow alone will help you with taxes in retirement. What it's meant to show you is that it's just one tool in your toolbox, okay? That by letting it grow, it can help play defense on taxes. It's, of course, a conversation you want to have with a CPA, a certified tax professional, and it's a great conversation, a game planning conversation to have with your advisor, okay? Now, remember when I said there are some of those investment vehicles that are not included in the combined income equation? Some of those examples are on your screen now. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go box by box, but quickly, I want to highlight the Roth box. For any of you that have the option of a Roth IRA, right? Maybe you have an employer-sponsored Roth 401k, Roth 403b. We always say consider increasing contributions into vehicles like a Roth. Okay. Roths can be one of the best vehicles in helping control taxes in retirement. My second box that I want to highlight is the HSA box. Okay. Now, my note on HSAs is that, and I'm going to try to follow the bouncing ball here, is that if you're 65 filing for Social Security, you are auto enrolled into Medicare Part A. Okay. Now, Medicare Part A is the free Medicare. I quote that because I don't think anything in our world is free, but you don't pay premiums for Part A, right? But if you're 65 and older, electing Social Security, you're auto enrolled in Part A. If you're on Part A Medicare, you can be penalized for contributing to an individual HSA. And yes, I emphasize the word individual on purpose because there are things called family HSAs that are out there. And I'm not going to sit here and say there's a workaround, but I will say that if you're curious on how those things work, consult a licensed Medicare officer and an advisor, of course, that can help game plan around these decisions. Okay. Now, our last and final slide, and also our fifth and final key gold slide, because I really feel like, again, we covered a ton of material. And I don't think everyone on the call will find every slide we went over applicable to themselves and what they're going through. So, of course, we want to make sure that at minimum, you're taking away some of the key questions you should be asking yourself as you go to plan to take your benefit. So, right at the start, how long are you working or are you working? Okay. And if you're taking any benefit before full retirement age, again, know that earnings limit will come into play. All right. The second question is, what are your income needs? What's your withdrawal rate? Okay. As you approach retirement, make sure you sit down and have a long discussion with your advisor on what your expenses are, what your needs are, what your fund money needs are, right? And understand how those outside accounts, those other two legs of the three-legged stool, are going to come into play to meet those needs and hopefully letting Social Security grow, but again, reassuring when it's best to take Social Security. And then third and final, life expectancy, right? We really only ask this question if you're single, right? So if you're single, know your personal health, know your family health, right? And of course, if you have poor health or some conditions to worry about, probably best to take your benefit early so that you can get the most you can. All right. But if you have good personal health, good long family health, longevity in your family, and your outside accounts and your other, situations allow it, try your best to let your Social Security grow. Right. If you're single, remember you don't have a survivor benefit unless you're divorced and have those eligibilities for that benefit. Okay. So you want to try to maximize yours the best you can. Now, why don't we ask life expectancy to married couples? It's simply because data tells us there's a 50% shot that one of you, between you and your spouse, are going to live until the age of 90. So our general rule of thumb goes back to that third key gold slide, which is between the two spouses, try your best to maximize the higher earner spouse and their benefit. Okay. Lower earner, take whenever you want, or honestly, take when you're not going to be subjected to the earnings limit and when you retire. Right. But for the higher earner, try your best to max that benefit. That's how you're going to max the survivor benefit for your spouse. Not only that, that's how you maximize the most you both get from Social Security. Because remember, the growth of your benefit is a percentage-based system. So if you have a high benefit of 3,000 a month and a low benefit of 1,000 a month, 8% every year growth on that 3,000 will net you out more money than on the $1,000 benefit. So for higher earners between two spouses, again, grow that benefit. But again, I thank everyone for attending today. I know it's hard on a Thursday morning, right, to sit through Social Security. Hopefully, I made it a little bit more enlightened and fun. But Gina, I'll carry it over to you before we hit some questions.
Yes, just a couple closing slides too. I just want to, and then we'll make sure we answer some additional questions. So again, remember, if you've registered for this webinar, you should get within the next day or two the recorded link. So you can rewatch it, you can share it with anyone. If for some reason you don't, you'll find this recording on our website at 401kplanprofessionals.com. A lot of other great videos out there and information. Our 8 steps to becoming financially well is also out there. And then our entire video series, you can register for that. Our office hours, also something I just want to point out. You can sign up for a one-on-one with our team if you want to talk about your 401k, your retirement goals, Social Security, Medicare, things like that. You can schedule a one-on-one with our team. You can go to our website or just 401kplanprofessionals.com/office hours, find a date and time that works for you. So another way that you can engage with us too. Um, and yes, I just wanted to pause here. I just wanted to point out a couple other really popular webinars. Again, this will be recorded and available to you. If you'd like the deck or the resource guide, let me know. We're doing HSAs. I know Zach touched on that. HSAs. Oh, if you could just go back one
Yep.
there. Oh, yeah. Actually, the next slide is there too. But August, we're going to be doing HSAs. And then in September, we're doing Medicare. So a couple resources there. And then Zach, if you just want to scroll ahead, maybe pause on my contact information.
Sure.
Yeah, you can kind of slowly go through those. Thank you very much. I know we've got tons of webinars. Just going to pause here. Again, if you have any questions or you want the resources or deck, put your information in the Q&A or chat with your email, or just reach out to our team. Our team is our first name at 401kplanprofessionals.com. I can email you back the deck, the resource guide, whatever you need. If you have questions that didn't get answered today, email them to me. If our team doesn't know the answer, I know how to get a hold of Zach and Jack.
You sure do.
And they're a great resource. So yes, so I appreciate that
Yeah.
that we have you as a great resource too. But there is my email if we can help you. Again, I know there's still probably some questions. So if any of you need to go, if you've had your questions answered, you've got the resources in your back pocket. Thank you again for your time. For those of you who still have questions or maybe questions we haven't answered, stick around. I know Jack is probably still answering those questions in the chat and the Q&A. And Jack, certainly let us know if there's any theme or question that you think might be better that we answer live.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gina. Yeah, I'm just looking through some of the questions that were submitted before the call that I think mostly have been addressed. We talked about a little bit around how your 401k plays into maybe the earnings test. One thing that I would mention on that is when you are in retirement, any withdrawals from your IRA, like Zach mentioned, do go towards that combined income in determining how much of your benefits will be taxable. Zach did address in the beginning the reliability about Social Security and some of the ways that Congress and the government can increase the viability around maybe increasing the full retirement age, increasing taxes, or potentially even increasing the wage cap on what people pay into Social Security. There was one question I think was a little bit niche around if you are now a permanent resident. One thing I would say to that is as long as you do have your Social Security number and you are paying into Social Security for at least 40 quarters, you will then have your own retirement benefit. If you have not paid into Social Security for at least 40 quarters, if you are married, you could be entitled to spousal and survivor benefits going forward. Already talked about divorce benefits, but again, as long as that marriage lasted 10 plus consecutive years, you can be entitled to benefits off of your previous marriage as long as you haven't remarried just yet. Trying to see if there's anything else. I know a lot of people, I've gotten a lot of questions in the past around if Social Security is taxed. I know Zach covered our entire section on taxes.
I will say I can draw that out a little bit, Jack, just because it also involves a lot of questions that we've got from the one beautiful bill and the tax deductible, right? Because I will say that we've got a lot of questions on is my Social Security still taxed? I've been told, or I've read a headline that the current administration has gotten rid of the tax on Social Security. I'll just say as a side caveat, they're great marketers, right? Because ultimately, your Social Security benefit is still being taxed, but what they did is essentially a workaround. The reason why that they couldn't change the Social Security tax itself is because this tax is a self-funding tax that's written into the 1935 Act of Social Security. So the only way to actually change that is to amend that bill with a majority vote in Congress. right? So since the current administration couldn't get that 60 plus votes, they did the workaround and then through their one beautiful bill, which I don't, was it a budget bill, a tax bill? Regardless, they just
Yeah.
added that $6,000 deductible to all existing deductions, right? So that's if you're 65 and older, you don't have to be taking Social Security to get that. And it's also doubled for married filing jointly. Okay. Now it is due to expire in 2028, which then would have to be renewed by either the current or next administration. But just know your benefits are technically still being taxed. That's just an extra $6,000 deductible that was written into that previous bill. Um, I can also touch on the insolvency, Jack, just because I know this is what keeps up a lot of people at night, right? Like I'm a big planner, I'm a worrier. So I understand those people, even if like you're 5 years out, 8 years out from claiming your benefit, how much that can weigh on you, right? So again, as I said earlier, headlines are meant to scare us to make us click them. So try to comb through the scary headlines for now, right? The current insolvency estimation date is around 2032. And insolvency doesn't technically mean zero, it means cents on the dollar. And the current projection is around 81 cents on the dollar. So if nobody picked up a pen between now and 2032 in Congress, right, then you're going to essentially look to get around 80 cents on the dollar, right? But again, a lot of things can be changed between now and then. And I would really make sure to just pay attention to the 2028 presidential election cycle. That's going to help kind of paint the landscape of what both sides of the aisle are thinking about and then really the 2030 congressional cycle. Those are going to be the congressmen and congresswomen that are actually running during their elected term during the insolvency issue.
Mhm.
So I would be not surprised that anyone going out of to be an elected official during that cycle, Social Security and the fixes of the Social Security benefit will be a top three campaigning issue. So definitely try to comb through the noise for now. I know it's hard, but pay attention to those cycles. And then obviously during the 2030 cycle, call your local representative and let them know your thoughts.
Yeah, good advice. But we can't kick the can much further down the road. So
I can't speak necessarily for me and Jack, man. Jack and I might be a little screwed on what our benefit picture might look like, but we know, right? Congress isn't going to do anything until they absolutely have to,
right.
because as soon as they make, put pen on paper or make their opinions known, they either gain half the voting demographic or lose half the voting demographic.
Right.
So they're not really going to say much until it needs to be said, and it needs to be said during the 2030 cycle.
Exactly. And a variety of ways to,
Mhm.
keep this trust solvent. Like you
Right.
said, back in the Reagan era, we, gradually raised the full retirement age, the
Yeah.
retirement ages. So that could be part of the equation. Again, to your point, probably not going to impact, I completely agree, probably not going to impact people 50 or older. And yeah, so there's that could be part of the equation, certainly. But
Yeah. Yeah,
it'll be,
there's multiple things that they could project to be done.
yeah,
Who knows what they ultimately end up deciding on. I just think the FRA age would make the most sense just because of life expectancy, right? And
yeah,
it's not an increase on tax, right? And usually people that are, old enough will be grandfathered into older rules, and then me and Jack will just have to wait another year to retire ourselves.
right.
So be it.
But hey, you could be living to 100. So
Who knows? Modern medicine, yeah, you never know.
right. Exactly.
One
Let's see. Any
one
other
more.
questions in there, Jack? Go ahead.
Yeah, so there was one basically asking, and this might be a little bit more personal around when they want to file for their benefit. They're mentioning their full retirement age. Um, Being that, I just want to mention that Social Security looks at the month that your birthday is in. So coincide that with your full retirement age. So if it's 67, your full retirement age is the month that you're turning 67. If it's
Right.
66 plus however many odd months, it is those months, call it back from 67. If you want to file to receive your benefits on your full retirement age, just make sure that you elect on that statement when exactly that you want to receive those benefits, what month you want the payments to start. And something that you should know is that you can apply for your benefits up to 4 months prior. So if you
Yes.
want to ensure that, hey, I want my payments to start this month, you can elect that up to 4 months prior in the application.
Yeah, and trust me, that's actually a blessing. I just
Yeah.
walked through this with my own mother. My mother is an accountant for a township in New Jersey, and she's a huge planner, huge budgeter. So I can tell you that when you retire, that Friday you want the cake with your employees, that Monday you want your Social Security check, and you can plan ahead. So
Right.
it is a great idea to do that because then it's more of a celebration, right? It's not like, oh, I retired, now I got to do more paperwork.
Right.
Do it ahead of time. That way, when you retire, guess what? You're cashing that check the following week or the following month, right? Aligned right with what you've been planning on.
Exactly. That's a great tidbit of advice.
Mhm.
I agree. And I know I do get a lot of questions about people trying to schedule appointments with Social Security, or they're calling the 800 number. I think, Zach, one bit of advice that you shared with us at the last presentation is maybe try to go to your local Social Security office, find that phone number.
Yeah,
Usually have a greater luck being able to talk to a human and getting on their calendar. So you
yeah.
want to think about that, because I know sometimes, to your point, it can be a couple of months before you get that meeting scheduled with somebody at Social Security if you do need an in-person meeting.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a if you Google SSA office locator, there's a link right from the SSA.gov site where you can just type in a zip code and it'll tell you exactly which office your zip code is assigned to, if you will.
Awesome.
So depending on where you live, there might be multiple, right? If you're in the Northeast like me, there's probably 5 offices within an hour and a half driving distance. But depending if you're in rural, right, there might be only one office, in your portion of the state or whatever. So you can just go to that office locator, find that out. If you are calling, my recommendation is choose to call either on a Monday or Tuesday and call within the first hour their lines open, which I think is 8 a.m., right, Jack? 8 to 9 a.m.
So, yep.
We've gotten data from like hold times and days of the week that are the best, and Mondays and Tuesdays and that 8 to 9 a.m. are beyond the greatest. I mean, we've heard horror stories of 4, 5, 6 hour hold times. Luckily, they just started the whole like, hey, if you want to hold your place in line, press this number and we'll call you back. And I've actually heard that they do call you back. So
We've gotten very efficient with
yeah, they've gotten
picking
a
up
little
on
bit
service
better
calls.
with the phone stuff because they've gotten budget cuts elsewhere. They've tried to increase, the accessibility because they realize that budget cuts means longer wait times, right? Longer for in-person appointments and all that. So
Great.
Yep.
Great tidbits to close with. Any other questions? I'll give anyone just maybe another minute to submit any questions. Otherwise, from what I can see, Jack, I think you answered everything, either live or in response on the Q&A or chat. And again, please remember, you can reach out to our team, our first name at 401kplanprofessionals.com if you have other questions. Again, in the comments, you can leave your email address if you'd like us to follow up with the deck or the resources. So happy to get all of that information in your hands.
Correct.
All
Yeah,
right.
just really quickly, I know we are a little bit behind on time, but I don't want to leave somebody high and dry here. I know Zach mentioned a little bit around if you are signed up for Social Security, if you have an HSA. This question says, can you not get Medicare? Zach mentioned that is not true, but you can be penalized for contributions made to your HSA up to 6 months within the 6 month prior window of signing up for Medicare Part A. So
yeah,
it is just, and by the way, this is a small penalty, and it's something that you actually can, and not giving too much advice here, but you can manipulate it in some ways. And it's something that Congress has actually brought up for voting to potentially get rid of. So
hmm
it's something that you can kick the can down the road a little bit on. But I know that is a concern for people. If you're planning on signing up for Medicare, once you hit 65, if you have that HSA, just make sure we stop contributions up to 6 months prior.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The Medicare eligibility supersedes all, right? Like the government's not going to say, oh, you have this outside investment account that you have tax advantages of. We're just not going to get you health insurance, right? They're going to give you the health insurance, but if you keep contributing to that outside account, IRS will penalize you for. So, yeah, it does nothing to affect your eligibility for the health insurance. It just provides the penalty if you continue contributing. But if you're worried about the workarounds, or if how Jack put it, I would consult a licensed Medicare
Absolutely.
professional.
Yeah.
Because I will say this, we have Medicare consultants here at MFS. The HSA rules are some of the hardest to not only explain, but to even understand how it's applied. And that's exactly why it's probably one of the next things that I think that's the House that's trying to push an HSA clarification bill,
Yeah.
part of maybe like another Secure Act amendment or something. But ultimately, that's what we expect over the next 18 months, that there's going to be some more clearer rules, maybe not passed, but at least brought to the floor to talk about clarifying the HSA rules.
And keep in mind, we'll take a deeper dive on those. We do have a Medicare webinar coming up and HSA. We do speak a lot to the HSA. I think it's a fantastic vehicle, both
Oh,
from a
it's
tax standpoint. It's
yes.
absolutely fantastic. But again, to your point, just want to make sure you understand the rules. Big thing there is also to keep all of your receipts. Anything you paid out of pocket, that's a big one.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll take a deeper dive into those on those upcoming webinars too. But yeah, good question. Good, complex stuff. Complex stuff.
I like it. Keeps me on my toes, right,
That's
Jack?
right. That's
Absolutely.
right. Okay, well, I think we've got all the questions answered. Zach and Jack, thanks again. We really appreciate your partnership. We appreciate MFS Investments and the education you provide, and we can share with our clients. So appreciate it. And everyone else, thank you for your time and have a great day.